The Trump administration's crackdown on immigration is not only targeting non-citizens living in the United States illegally, but also those living in the country legally.
The Trump administration is seeking to deport Khalil, a legal permanent resident, for his role in pro-Palestinian protests.
Federal agents detained tough student and Turkish national Ramisa Oster.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he is the man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador.
What rights do non-citizens living legally in the U.S. have? Can they be legally deported? Do they have due process rights?
Non-citizens in the United States have basically nearly all the rights that citizens have.
Alex Alenikoff taught immigration law at Georgetown in Michigan. He even co-wrote the immigration law casebook.
The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is written in terms of persons. All persons shall be guaranteed due process of law and equal protection under the law.
Take the right to free speech. Anyone living in the United States, no matter their citizenship status, can say most things without fear of criminal prosecution. But for non-citizens, that right comes with a caveat.
We do have this odd anomaly, though, that these rights are less potent in the immigration area, meaning that non-citizens can be deported. And they may be deported for conduct that might be protected if it were undertaken by a U.S. citizen.
In other words, while a non-citizen cannot be criminally charged for protected speech, they potentially can be removed from the country for it. That's because, under America's immigration laws, authorities can consider speech grounds for removal if it is interpreted as a threat to national security or public safety.
The Immigration and Nationality Act is codified in Title VIII of the United States Code.
Under the law, there are some general categories for which a non-citizen legally residing in the U.S. can be deported. Most are pretty clear, but some of the law's provisions are a bit more ambiguous.
There's some vaguer grounds of deportation, including if one has participated in activities that are contrary to the foreign policy of the United States, or if one has committed a crime of moral turpitude. Moral turpitude is an old-fashioned word that hasn't been so well defined in our law.
It is on these fuzzier grounds that the Trump administration is pursuing some of its more high-profile cases.
This is a movement, an anti-war movement.
Take Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia University graduate student and Palestinian activist.
Pro-Hamas activist.
The government claims that Khalil's support for Hamas and his role in Columbia University's campus protests makes him a national security threat. But Alenikoff says using these grounds allows the government to make sweeping accusations.
And we stand tall.
Virtually any non-citizen who participated in any of the protests against the war in Gaza would now be rendered deportable if the government views that in some way as supporting anti-Semitism. It's a very broad reading of the law.
Broad, but ultimately legal.
But to say it's a normal process still is to understate the hardship.
And then there is the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Now to the legal showdown between the White House and courts. It's over a mistakenly deported man who's currently in prison in El Salvador.
The White House says Garcia has affiliations with the MS-13 gang, which his family denies.
And he was put on a plane without any process, without any chance to be told where he was going or why, or to fight the charges against him.
So, what due process rights do non-citizens have?
So the immigration law provides that if the government thinks someone is deportable, they file a charge and bring them before an immigration judge, who's actually a member of the Department of Justice.
If the immigration judge rules against a non-citizen, that decision may ultimately be reviewed in the federal court system.
You could appeal that to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and that can then be appealed to a federal court of appeals, and then ultimately to the Supreme Court. So due process still applies.
The Trump administration did not afford Abrego Garcia due process rights, and it has seemingly done little, if anything, to follow the Supreme Court's order to facilitate his return.
It's clear under the Supreme Court's opinion that they were removed from the country illegally and unconstitutionally. 9 justices agreed on that. What some people see as the worst possibility here is they may be setting up the situation where they can remove citizens of the United States.
Homegrown criminals, I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
The Constitution is clear. A United States citizen cannot be deported or denied entry to the country.
I have a very hard time thinking that the Supreme Court would not order the government to bring a U.S. citizen back to the country. U.S. citizens have a right not to be exiled from the United States. They can't be deported from the United States. I think the much more serious problem for this country is how we define ourselves as a nation of immigrants, as a nation devoted to due process, as a nation that corrects its mistakes when they've been pointed out to us.